Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. I started this project in early 2017. It was a transition from the project Nowhere People. At the very end of that project, I was meeting with stateless people in Europe who had been in and out of immigration detention dozens of times. I thought I had heard all the stories of stateless people around the world, but the stories of that impact that immigration detention had on somebody in the UK or in Italy or in Serbia was unlike any story I'd ever heard before. And automatically, I knew that was going to be the next project I was going to sink my teeth into. I had no idea what to expect, what was to come, but that's one of the exciting parts of being a documentary photographer, is that element of discovery along the way and allowing things to organically present themselves. This particular series of 12 images, I believe it is 10 images, are 10 images of a series of about 35 of panoramics of these massive immigration detention centers all across the country. This is the first time they've ever been exhibited. They have never been published because I have found no publisher willing to publish them. And it's actually the first of 3 parts to the work that has been working on here in the United States over the past 2 years. The second installment will be published the beginning of, or the spring of next year, and the third part sometimes towards the end of summer, hopefully right before election time. The rationale behind working on this particular story, and particularly shooting panoramics and the way that they've been treated and photographed, is most of the times when we look at how the architecture of this mammoth immigration detention system in the United States has been visually translated is through infographics or a map with dots. I've tried to create a series of pictures that actually provides a visual photographic reference point for people to see where these places actually are, what they look like, and also the menacing, ominous, sinister sense of mood that basically permeates all around them. It's been a collaborative process. In the past, my partner and I have always traveled in different trajectories, but working in the United States has been a collaborative process in the sense that together we've traveled over 20,000 miles in our car, crisscrossing the United States, looking at places and meeting with people that have largely been constructed intentionally out of sight, or people who have, for the most part, been completely and totally let down by this country and are now invisible to a degree as well. What is true is that people come to this country seeking safety and sanctuary, and they still see the United States as this beacon of hope. But when they come here, most people, when you talk with people who have been in detention, they will not describe approaching the US border and surrendering themselves. They'll never use the word surrender. They'll always use the word present. And when you say, why don't you use the word surrender? They say, because surrender implies that I've done something wrong. Present means I'm formally presenting myself as a human being to the state of the United States and asking for safety and sanctuary. Most of these pictures I've never seen printed, ever. They were all shot on film, huge, big negatives that were scanned. And when I presented all this and Mike approached me, the first thing he said was, Greg, I want to print these things really big. And I was like, let's do it. Let's go for it. But walking in here yesterday and standing in front of a picture taken in Taylor, Texas, of the T. Don Hutto facility, which is a women's facility just outside, about 40 minutes outside of Austin, Texas. And standing in front of that print, I told Mike and Charlie yesterday that the proportionality of the print actually places me right at the moment when I click the shutter on that Fuji X617 camera, panoramic camera. That the feeling that I got of the absence of a bunch of teenagers playing baseball on a field knowing that just across the fence on every day would be dozens of women in prison uniforms, most of them who have done absolutely nothing wrong other than come to the country. That juxtaposition really, that ominous sense really sticks with me when I look at the photographs when they're printed this big. And so what I wanted to try to do was to do a couple things with these images. It's not traditional photojournalism, reportage. It's not art photography either. It's documenting. And what I wanted to try to do with these photographs was to create a sense of place. These facilities are built intentionally and strategically in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Or, as I've described it, they're buried in nothingness. They're buried in the nothingness of a desert. They're buried in the nothingness of a farmlands, or even with the Tacoma, Washington facility. It's buried in the middle of an industrial area, right in the middle of the heart of the city, where people can't see them, where it makes it impossible or so challenging for loved ones to go and visit someone who's in detention, for the legal community to actually have access to them to provide legal assistance, which it's been proven that just simply the access to a lawyer increases your chances of having a positive a result in your asylum case is raised exponentially. I'll never be able to get inside one of these places with my camera freely, and if I ever was, I would be so monitored and regulated. And to be honest with you, I feel that the pictures that I would be creating are pictures that have already been taken. They're pictures that people have already seen. They're pictures of people being held administratively in detention centers with uniforms on that automatically associate them with a level of criminality that they do not deserve. So it's actually feeding into prejudices and stereotypes that have already been created, which I don't want to do with this work. But how do you humanize a place like this? I just want to say that I'm incredibly proud of this work, incredibly proud to be a part and have it shown here at the Gage Gallery. I just want to say that there's one little piece of information that I think is really interesting that all of us should know about, and that's supporting some of the statistics on the wall over here, is that we all know that immigration detention is a multi-billion-dollar business here in the United States. These are not federally built detention facilities. They're actually run, owned, and operated by private corporations that are profiting off of U.S. policy. And the Department of Homeland Security is actually subsidizing these. And how are they subsidizing them? For a facility like Tacoma, Washington, that basically has about 1,000 beds, it has a guaranteed bed minimum that DHS pays it, whether the beds are full or not. But there are alternatives, which people need to know about, and those alternatives make a significant difference. And I'll tell you how it is a significant difference. Department of Homeland Security estimates that it costs $133 per day to hold one adult in immigration detention per day. It costs $319 per day to detain a family in detention in the United States. There are proven to be alternative to detention programs across the United States that actually cost $5 per day for somebody and treats them in a humane way where they're not locked behind bars, they're not isolated and segregated from their families in a wider community, they have access to legal assistance, and they actually feel like a human being. What is logical? I think we're finished, but I just want to say thank you again for coming out, and thank you again, Mike, and everybody here at Gage Gallery in Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Thanks, buddy. I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.